2023, I went to a summer school in the US. And there I registered for a current events class. In that class, we all had to pick a topic to present about, and one of the topics that my classmate picked was called biases in representation in the media. What my classmate talked about was how in his home country, there were two candidates running for election. One candidate, he made the mistake of breaking one of his election promises. The other candidate, he did the same thing. However, one of these candidates were absolutely ravaged by the media. The media talked about how bad he was, how much of a failure he was, how you shouldn't vote for him because of this. But the other candidate, he basically got off scot-free. However, you see, at that time, because of the news I read, I was a staunch supporter of the second candidate, the one that got off scot-free. And so what I thought was, there can't be some difference between their cases. What my classmate was saying was misinformation. That's essentially what I thought. It was only until months later when I finally saw an accurate reporting of what happened from an unbiased website, I understood what my classmate was talking about. Essentially, he was correct. The two candidates did do the same mistake. We all know that biases, they exist. Almost everything is biased. The tone of something is biased, sometimes the style is biased, sometimes the news website's preferences of news is biased. However, have you ever wondered why sometimes these biases in the news websites that we read, they get ingrained into ourselves, and we can't even take in opposing opinions, much less investigate them, look into them, and understand them? There are two main reasons why this happens, and together they perpetuate an everlasting cycle of misinformation and polarization. The first reason is confirmation biases. Now, some of you might understand this term, and some of you might not. What this essentially means is that you would like to look at things that reinforces your worldview, rather than things that challenges it. For example, when perhaps you support a certain candidate, like I did, you will look into things that tells you that this candidate is good. And on the other hand, you will not look into things that tells you that this candidate is a bad person. To illustrate this in numbers, I have brought two charts. The first chart, it talks about media biases. So there are two things I want you to focus on the first chart. The first chart tells us that CNN is mainly a leftist news outlet, and Fox News is mainly a rightist news outlet. And now, on the second chart was provided by Pew Research Center. This talks about how people of each political ideology, what news outlets do they trust, and what news outlets do they not trust. So we can see that liberals, Democrats, aka leftists, they usually trust CNN the most, with 70% of people saying that they think CNN is a trustworthy source. On the other hand, for conservatives, and they can also be called as rightists, they're basically the same, Fox News is trusted the most, with over 75% of people who are conservative saying that they think that Fox News reports news accurately. Now, we can see a correlation between the political leanings of a news website and its target audience. Essentially, leftist news outlets, they attract a leftist audience, and the rightist news outlet, they attract a rightist audience. And this is further exacerbated by the fact that these news websites, they know what's happening. CNN, they know that who their target audience is. Fox News, they know that too. Thus, these news websites, they want to print news that appeals to their target audience. So CNN, they want to print news that appeals to their target audience of liberals. And Fox News, they want to print news that appeals to their target audience of conservatives. This is the first reason that drives these biases. The second reason is the fact that overall, there is no pure independent media, except for maybe Wikipedia, but that's unreliable according to my teachers. So The thing is, running a news website, it takes time, it takes people, it takes money. And usually, you just can't take these time, people, and money out of thin air. You have to get them from somewhere. Usually, this somewhere is investors and donors. These people who invest in these news companies, they essentially gain control of what the news outlets say. So, for example, if certain news outlets have its investor be someone who supports a certain candidate, then it is most likely that this news website, they will print news that supports the candidate that the investor of the news website supports. So fundamentally, the issue of the news outlet not being independent means that these outlets will always have biases in them. They might be large, they might be small, they might be diluted, they might be everywhere, but the biases, they always exist. Now, essentially, this turns into a cycle. First, there is bias in the media. The media, the news outlet, they have a bias because it being not independent. The editors of this news outlet, the investors in this news outlet, the writers of these news articles, they are biased. And thus, this creates a bias in the news outlet itself. And now, this culminates into the audience being biased. The biases in the news outlets attracts a biased audience. And these biased audiences, they will only want to read articles that are biased towards their worldview. And since this results in the confirmation bias of the audience, this further incentivizes the media to print things that the audience likes. And thus, this goes into a cycle. The media prints news that the audience likes. The audience incentivizes the media to print news that they like. And now the media gets even more biased, and the audience gets even more biased. This is an everlasting cycle that can only result in one thing: radicalization. Now, am I saying that you should not have opinions on subjects? No, that's not what I'm saying. You should always understand what's happening before making these opinions, though. And opinions and ideologies, they're often like emotions. I have once been told by a certain school counselor that I need to control my emotions instead of letting my emotions control me. Now, this also applies to ideologies and opinions. You need to be able to control your ideology, your opinions. You do not want these ideologies, these opinions, to make you unable to even think about opposing views. If your ideology or opinion controls you, then this results in radicalization and you being unable to know what's happening. Now, what I'm saying is also not that you should always be a centrist, you should always take the status quo as the best thing. Now, sometimes these biased news outlets, in the future, they might not be regarded as biased. For example, the abolitionists, at the era of slavery, abolitionism was considered to be a bunch of radicals, a bunch of extremists. But right now, when any of you call the people who wanted slaves to be free, will any of you call them extremists? No. The same applies for Martin Luther King. At the era of Jim Crow, many Southerners, they consider Martin Luther King as an extremist. However, in the end, he was right. However, in order to form your opinions on what is happening, we need to first understand what is happening. People like the abolitionists, people like Martin Luther King, they didn't do what they did, they didn't think of what they did, because they ignored what is happening and instead just formed a new ideology by themselves. They understood what is happening. And to understand what is happening, one of the key things you need to do is to diversify your media sources. By diversify, I mean watching media sources from across the political spectrum. Now, here is a slide chart of certain media sources. Now, this does not document accuracy, of course, and so I'm not saying that the ones on the center or the left or on the right is good. However, in order to get all of the point of views on a certain subject, and in order to understand what is truly happening, we need to look at multiple news outlets and their analysis of what's happening, and you can corroborate these information together, and then you get what you can understand as real. And using these information that you understand as real, using these information that you can finally get to be accurate. You can use this to finally form an informed opinion of what's happening, instead of having these stories be left in the dark for you. Now, I'm sure some of you in this audience are probably thinking, why is this important? Why do we have to watch news? Why can't I just get on with my life? Now, the reason what you watch and what you understand about news is important is that you matter. Each of your actions, although infinitely small, still exists. It is you people that goes together into one society and make actions. Do you know that the large portion of InfoWars viewers, InfoWars is a far-right conspiracy website, do you know that the large portion of these people, they don't even believe in climate change? And while you might be thinking, just let them not believe it, I don't care. 100 people not believing in climate change means 100 people who will not help us fight climate change, which means we have lost 100 people who could have helped us fight climate change, but who is now not helping us fight climate change. Now, each of your actions matter. So in order to make sure your actions matter for good, you need to understand what's happening and to know what is the right thing to do in this context. You need to form your own opinions based on your understanding of this world. And to understand this world, we have to know what's happening. Thank you.